Hey guys, I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and I'm here to talk about a graphic novel I read last week, Captain Britain, Volume 1. I don't remember what this one's called. The Birth of a Legend. This was a book that was printed in Great Britain. I know that because it cost almost £16, and that's the little pound symbol. This collects, I believe, the first 23 issues of Captain Britain Weekly, and it may not look like a big book. It's not 23 full issues. What was going on was Captain Britain Weekly was an anthology, and so there were only in a given issue 8 pages actually devoted to Captain Britain, and then the rest of the issue would have reprints from older American comics. So they would have Nick Fury stories and Fantastic Four, and I'm sure later on they had other characters. And let's see, this is, so it's 23 8-page segments of Captain Britain. Now, if you are familiar with Captain Britain, you are probably, I don't know how familiar you are with Captain Britain. I knew that at one point he dressed like this, and I knew that he wasn't always the way that I know him to be. He wasn't always like that. But really, reading this was a bit of a shock for me because this is an entirely different Captain Britain than the one I know. The one I know has a lot more mystical stuff surrounding him. For example, by and large, I came to know Captain Britain from the Excalibur comics of the late 80s and 1990s. And the Captain Britain of Excalibur, he is very embroiled with the multiverse. There's a lot of multiverse stuff going on with him, and there's a lot of really fantastical stuff surrounding that character in his world. A lot of the stuff that I know to be part of Captain Britain's mythos was introduced by Alan Moore and Jamie Delano, and then kind of picked up by Chris Claremont in Excalibur. A lot of that hasn't been introduced at this point, which is the very beginning. This is like 1976, I think, is when this starts. In reality, this is basically Spider-Man with a different name and costume. Captain Britain is a grad student. He is an orphan. His parents both died. He thinks it's his fault, and he has an older brother named Jamie and a twin sister named Betsy. And if you're an X-Men fan, you know all of these characters. Jamie Braddock eventually becomes sort of a recurring character in Excalibur and various Uncanny X-Men issues where Chris Claremont was writing. I know in the mid-2000s, Claremont used Jamie Braddock briefly. And then what else is there here? Courtney Ross, if you've read Excalibur, Courtney Ross is introduced here. And I keep going back to Excalibur. That's basically because after Captain Britain Weekly, after all of these British comics featuring Captain Britain, after they stopped, after they were over, the only place that Captain Britain and all of his supporting characters were showing up was in Excalibur. So Megan, who was introduced by Alan Moore, Courtney Ross, all of those characters were showing up in Excalibur on a regular basis. But this is very much Spider-Man's status quo. Brian Braddock is a student at the university. Courtney Ross is his friend. She wants to be his girlfriend, but he doesn't really see her that way, and he's trying to balance life as a superhero and as an ordinary college student. And that's basically what it is. The first, I think, 10 issues are written by Chris Claremont, and then Gary Friedrich wrote the rest of this book. You may know Gary Friedrich. He worked on Ghost Rider, and he's also the guy who a few years ago kind of had some legal trouble with Marvel. He sued Marvel, and then Marvel countersued. You may know his name from that whole bit of business. And honestly, this book is not bad. However, like I said, if you know Captain Britain to be kind of, if you experienced Captain Britain from the comics from the 80s and 90s, then this is going to be something entirely different. And you may not like it if you are wanting Captain Britain from the 80s and 90s. This isn't bad, but it's not the same kind of character. And I think that's my biggest problem with it. And it's not even a problem, because a lot of times it takes a long time for characters and for a series to really get good. For example, I'm a big X-Men fan, but I really don't think that there's that much good stuff in the first 66 issues of X-Men. There's like maybe a tenth of that is actually good stuff, and the rest of it is kind of bad and you can just ignore it. So it took the X-Men a really long time to get to a point where they were really good and you could actually read the series and not be embarrassed to say, hey, I'm reading X-Men. It took a long time for Captain Britain to be where he is now. And this stuff isn't even bad, but I do think it took a long time for the character and for the series to kind of find its own identity, because this is basically British Spider-Man. And again, nothing wrong with Spider-Man, but I like where Captain Britain was at starting in the 1980s a lot more than where I like where this is at. And that's really all I have to say here. There are a few other things. Betsy Braddock, if you are expecting the Betsy from the X-Men comics, you're not going to get that either. Betsy, she's barely in this. She's only in like a fourth of the book, and she's basically just a plot device, but what little we do see of her, she does not act anything like the Betsy Braddock that we later see in New Mutants and Uncanny X-Men starting in the mid to late 80s. So that's another thing. It takes a long time for these characters to kind of find a point where the writers are happy with where that character is at and are happy with how many stories they can tell with that point that that character is at. So that's another one of those things. It just took a long time for Betsy Braddock to kind of become the character that she became in the 1980s. And of course, if you watched my review of X-Men A Skinning of Souls, you know that Betsy Braddock has had a really complex backstory and history throughout comics since she first appeared, but that's neither here nor there. Overall, would I recommend this book? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. If you are not a fan of Captain Britain, if you've never read anything with Captain Britain, this is going to be very serviceable and very enjoyable. It's basically, like I said, British Spider-Man. And if you are a fan of Captain Britain, like from Excalibur or from the MI-13, that was a series that recently, well, I say recently, it's been like 8 years, a series that ended a little while back. If you're a fan of Captain Britain from those comics, this is going to be a very different thing. And if you don't mind experiencing a very different type of Captain Britain, then I would say go ahead and check this out. I don't know how available this book is, because I bought this book and Volume 2 used in a comic book store in a bargain bin somewhere. And I've looked them up online, and at least in America, they're not easy to come by. I think Volume 3 is like, it would be about $25 including shipping. And that's just a little pricey for me when a book is only about that big. I don't like paying that much money when you're not getting a whole heck of a lot of book, if you know what I'm saying. And also, I have the, the Alan Moore stuff and the Jamie Delano stuff in trade, but they also collected all of that stuff in the books that look like this. So there's, I think, 5 volumes of this series that was printed in Great Britain, but if you happen to already have the Alan Moore and Jamie Delano stuff, which I have in 2 trades, and I'm not going to go get them right now, but if you do have those books, then you only have to go up to Volume 3 of this series, and then you have basically everything with Captain Britain. That's all I have to say here. I really didn't have a whole lot to say about this book, but I wanted to go ahead and say what I thought about it. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading Volume 2, and I really wish that I had easier access to Volume 3, and then I could just have all of that Captain Britain stuff right there at my hands, and I can just read it all. But I'm probably going to seek out Volume 3 someday. I'm going to see if I can find it cheaper than what it was on Amazon. And that's all I have to say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, I hope that you will like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be doing another video tomorrow reviewing a different book. So I will see you guys then. Have a great day.